So AG, I am not as cool as you. I'm still behind on the Substack Live wagon. I don't know why. Like I do them when other people invite me, but I don't know. I feel like I still use these Zooms, and I feel like the people who still use Facebook and everybody else has like moved on to TikTok. Like I don't know. So I appreciate you coming. But we can pretend this is a Substack Live.
All right, that sounds good.
So what's going on with you? What are you focused on right now? Because you are so prolific.
Well, today, I recorded an interview with Simon Rosenberg from the Hopium Chronicles on Substack. That's going to air on the Midas Touch Network Sunday at noon. And we talked about election security and being the author of the Hopium Chronicles. It's a hope-filled conversation. We also today recorded the Sunday episode of Unjustified, which I co-host with the former Deputy Director Andy McCabe. And
Mhm.
but everything that I kind of, and I went live on Substack with Joe from Jersey, but everything kind of congealed around sort of the same message to the Trump administration, and Republicans writ large took a massive blow to their agenda today with the Supreme Court's 6-3 decision to gut his tariff project, calling it illegal. And a couple of things that I noted, that I'd like to note here if I could,
Yes,
is
please.
that Trump is very, very mad about this. And he gave a big word salad press conference. But my number one takeaway from that horrific, stupid thing, was that he admitted that his tariffs were illegal. He said, I'll have to find other ways. And then he went into this thing saying, the great news is Chief Justice John Roberts said that all these, a dissenter, who I think was Kavanaugh in this case, said that he can do all these tariffs in all these other statutes, which he called statues, and he listed them.
Did it really
But
say statues?
yeah, he said statues, and then he said it's a terrific thing, statutes, and he corrected himself, which is kind of how he operates. But what he failed to notice maybe or tell anybody was that the Chief Justice actually wrote a footnote about Kavanaugh's dissent and those other things. And he's like, look, yeah, there's other laws, but we don't litigate hypotheticals that aren't before us here. And I'm not going to tell you that he can do all of this that he wants to do under those other statutes. He basically said no. And I think what we got to realize is that Trump just wasted 13 months. Had he just gone to Congress and tried to hash this out with Congress, it might have gotten done faster. Simon Rosenberg says it probably wouldn't have gotten done either because Congress wouldn't have stood up for it because they voted in both chambers to repeal some of these tariffs because they're just so stupid and illegal. But we got to kind of remember that these Republicans in Congress have to be elected again. They have to run for office again, and Donald Trump doesn't. Whether he tries to hold on to power illegally in 2028, somehow leaves peacefully, or if it happens before 2028, he doesn't have to run again, is the bottom line. And these Republicans in Congress do, and they don't like these tariffs either. And so for them to be shut out like this, by a Supreme Court where he's, including Gorsuch, who he appointed, he's very, very mad. He's been kicked while he's down, and it's going to get uglier for him, which is good for us. Anytime he's mad, I get really happy. So I think that's the main takeaway, at least from today's news. There was a ton of good news that came out last week as well, but that's my main takeaway from today.
Yeah. I was going to say on the SCOTUS opinion, um, I don't think that he wanted to go through Congress because I don't think this is really not about imposing tariffs. It's about having leverage, right? It's about having leverage so that you can threaten, so that he can do his mob style tactics. And that's precisely why he chose IEPA and not these six other statutes that actually authorize tariffs, because the other ones are more cabined. Like they either require factual findings or they have to be for a very specific reason, or they have a cap on the amount of the tariff, or there's a duration on the length of the tariff. And of course, we know that Trump doesn't like any constraints at all. And I think, I mean, because like, let's be honest, like, what was he imposing tariffs for? For, prosecuting Bolsonaro in
Mm.
Brazil? Or because what Canada did something that he didn't like? I mean, that was like completely random.
I don't
They
know.
I don't know. They,
Yeah,
did
elected
something
Mark
to
Carney.
protect trans rights or something, and it was so for him. I think this is a leverage tool, um, and the what I think is interesting about that Supreme Court opinion, and that Kavanaugh dissent was really weird. It was kind of long and rambling, in my opinion. I mean, I haven't read. I was like, it's 170 pages long, so I went through it very quickly. I have to go back. Um, it's just kind of this facile. I don't know. I never understand what Kavanaugh is doing, but because in the case of these other statutes, the fact that these other statutes actually mention tariffs, like a canon of statutory interpretation is that it matters as much what Congress doesn't say as what it does say. And so if there are other statutes that actually say something, then there's probably a deliberation that went into not saying it in another. So anyway, um, I actually skeeted before we came on that I hope that John Roberts has filled out his mortgage paperwork correctly.
Yeah, that's a very good point. There's another thing I think that Trump will use and that we will hear that comes out of this ruling. Just like when his Department of Justice went to Berman and I can't remember the name of the other judge, Engelmeyer, I think, in the Epstein cases to try to get them to release grand
Oh.
jury testimony, which ends
Mhm.
up being like 76 pages from one FBI agent or something, not anything substantive from the Epstein files. But he went to those courts to ask for those to be released, the grand jury materials, so that the courts could say no, and then he could say, "I tried to release the Epstein files. Look, but the courts told me I couldn't do it." Just along that vein, I think we're going to hear if the economy sucks, he's going to blame the Supreme Court for gutting his tariff policy. He'll say, "We were the hottest country. We were the hottest, and now it's not good because of the Supreme Court."
Your
Like,
impression is really good.
thank you. I play my invisible accordion. I think that's what's going to happen. I think you'll see when the economy doesn't isn't doing well. He's like the Dow's not above 50,000 anymore. It's because of John Roberts, But what really blew me away, and I want to talk to you about this because I know this is part of
Okay.
your specialty, was when
Yes.
he said that the Supreme Court, and I know you know where I'm going, where he accused the Supreme Court of kowtowing to foreign interests. Like I would like
Oh.
in the press conference, he was like, "Yeah, they're
Oh, they're
beholden,
protecting other countries. They're not
they're
protecting the US.
they're beholden to foreign interests."
Yeah.
That was like, whoa. And you know what? Honestly, and I've said this several times before. Hey, Chief Justice John Roberts, I can't believe the leopards ate my judiciary. Because he's the reason, well, part of the reason that we're here.
Oh no, he's fully the reason.
Well, him and Mitch McConnell. But yes, yeah, because
Yes.
Mitch
The
McConnell could have
immunity,
gotten a
that's
few
why I
people.
think, I mean, look,
And
obviously I do
the
not
reason I'm
want
saying that,
politically motivated prosecutions and investigations, but
yeah, but
I
the reason I
will
say that
laugh
is
my
because
ass off if John Roberts gets investigated. I swear to God, like because he is the one who penned literally the words, even if the president initiates a sham investigation and prosecution or an investigation or prosecution for an improper motive, he has absolute immunity.
hmm
Okay, good
Yeah,
luck
and
with
when
that.
we see Trump try to seize voting machines in the midterm elections, that's also going to be John Roberts' fault because John Roberts gave him a pass on anything he does with the Department of Justice. Can't is completely and absolutely immune. That's why Jack Smith had to supersede his indictment and sort of kind of rewrite it a little bit to get rid of the Jeffrey Clark DOJ piece because John Roberts said anything that the president does with the Department of Justice is his prerogative, can't be touched, can't be reviewed judicially because it's immune, because it's part of his executive branch authority to take care that the laws are faithfully executed. Blah, blah. So it will be because of him, and the fact that they decided that the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment it
Yeah.
can't isn't self-executing, that it has to go through Congress. So that, and of course Mitch McConnell not getting a handful of Republicans to vote to convict and remove him and prevent him from running for office again. All of those things combined all come from John Roberts. And so that's why I say I can't believe the leopards ate my judiciary, because this is all on him. And it's going to be, he's probably one of the last guys left on the conservative part of the bench that cares about legacy of whether it's his own or the Supreme Court's. So it's going to be interesting to see
So
because he's
is he
now
like
going to
in
get,
denial? Because people say that. And then I'm like, but then these decisions don't make any sense, like the immunity decision, the Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. Like, in other words, like read the room, my friend.
he's terrible
This
at
is
reading
not
the room.
gonna look good for you. But maybe he's just convinced. I don't know. Maybe he's just convinced himself. What do you think, in the opinion, the language where it kind of he doesn't poo-poo it, but he's like, we're not gonna excuse this just because this was done on an emergency basis. In other words, there's no carve out for the major questions doctrine because this was an emergency, a declared national emergency. And then he goes on about, um, you know, the ability to declare emergencies tends to kindle emergencies. He's quoting like an old case called Youngstown. Um,
Mhm.
and it seems on the surface like, oh, they're kind of looking they're not buying this national emergency thing, but they don't ever actually second guess it. That's not the reason that they claw it back. So I just feel like a lot of the initial coverage about this case, like that I'm seeing, that they're like, you know, what was the New York Times headline? Um, Something like the Supreme Court, basically is effectively saying that the Supreme Court smacked him down. I don't think so. I think this is, at the end of the day, a relatively, I mean, it's based on statutory interpretation. It's not, I don't think it's going to, it I just wrote a piece on this for Substack. I don't think it portends that they're going to claw back other ways in which he is abusing his authority in like immigration or with the military or with removals and all of that stuff. I just don't see it happening.
Right. Well, it's going to be interesting. The great part is he didn't read this, so he thinks it's a huge blow to him, and that's kind of all I care
Oh,
about.
you're just, yeah,
Um,
you're still reveling in the fact that he's just angry. Yeah.
he is down, and this really hurts him. Um, but you know, I don't know. I think we're at a point where he has been slowly building, going after the judicial branch. He's already got Congress
Mhm.
in his pocket, right? He's already got the legislative branch fully uh, prostrate. But I think he's now, will continue to go after the judiciary, and maybe we'll see more leaks from the judicial conferences that Pam Bondi's not supposed to have, and so she'll file more um, judicial complaints that without attaching what she's not supposed to have. I'm talking about the Boasberg judicial complaint that was dismissed a while back. Because Boasberg went to Chief Justice Roberts at a judicial conference and relayed the concerns of his colleagues about the threats to judges in the judiciary. I am really interested in your thoughts to talk a little bit more about the potential of better make sure your mortgage documents are in order, John Roberts, because that he's going to start really investigating the Supreme Court. He's going to start investigating these
This is
judges.
what I immediately thought. I was like, oh, he's gonna tell Congress that, they need to impeach him or, or Gorsuch and Barrett. But then I was like, why would he do that? He's got the levers of power that he has already, decided that he's going to use against his enemies. And I think they're now his enemies, and he's gotten a taste of it.
Yeah, go a little
Like,
IRS
what does he
audit.
have to lose, really?
Right. Unfortunately, the person who needs an IRS audit is Thomas, and he was a dissenter in this particular
I
case.
know.
Um,
Huh.
it, I don't know, Asha. It's just everything is so upside down. I used to be able to sort of predict maybe what the Supreme Court was going to do. Can't do that at all anymore. Although about a month ago, I was pretty sure that the tariffs under IEPA was going to fall. And so was Trump, honestly, because about a month ago, I got an email from somebody, an insider, an inside resistor at Customs and Border Protection, who sent me an email. They got a memo they got called IEPA refund kickoff.
I
And
remember seeing this post that you wrote.
yeah, and I'm like, oh, looks like he knows he's going to lose. And so, I'm interested to know if there were any communications there between the Supreme Court before the decision came out, or if he just knew he was wrong on the law already. But and also another one I feel pretty confident about is birthright citizenship.
I was just
But
going to ask you, you feel confident about that? Because that
but I
is like
also
giving me heartburn.
I hate to feel confident about anything though, because I was convinced that they wouldn't grant him absolute immunity.
Right.
Um, and that like turned the whole world upside down. And we also have to remember that in a ruling in the JGG case, which was the Alien Enemies Act case in Boasberg's courtroom, where they took 150 to 250 men, sent him to Seacoast prison in the middle of the night, and they were told to bring him back. And the Supreme Court, it went up to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court says you have to facilitate the return of Abrego Garcia. At least you have to talk to the judge, in this case, Judge Sines, about what you're doing to facilitate the return of Abrego Garcia. But they put a note in there where they said, but please remember, courts, that you have to give due regard and deference to the executive when it comes to matters of foreign affairs. And ever since they wrote that sentence, I was like, ah, God, because he's gonna quote that every day for the rest of his life. And he has. Everything is about national security now, whether it's elections, whether it's, his Fulton County thing that he's doing, whether it's blowing people up in the Caribbean, whether it's capturing Maduro. Oh, due regard and deference,
Even
due
the
regard and
tariffs, that
deference.
was one of their main arguments. One of their
So,
main arguments was that this was foreign affairs.
yep. So
Mhm.
that's, he turns on that. He turns to that for everything. So for Chief Justice to say, be mealy-mouthed on the national security part of this, the emergency part of this, also concerns me. But I hope he wastes another 13 months trying to do it with another law and have it be stopped and have it go through litigation until, it happens or he leaves office or tries a coup or whatever he decides to do. But um, I'm also concerned about what the Supreme Court's going to do about potentially what Donald Trump tries to do in the elections in the midterm elections. Because, like I said, John Roberts already gave him that hall pass to kind of do whatever you want with the DOJ, turn the DOJ into your vote stealing factory if you want.
Which is
It's
exactly what they're doing with these. The Fulton County is a test run
a
to try
test
to
run.
get. It's it's like the Velociraptors in Jurassic Park. They're
Yep,
testing the fences
yep,
to
that's
see where
exactly
the
what they're
weaknesses
doing.
are. Ivan is
Yeah.
asking whether the immunity and tariff decisions um, and birthright, like what you think, how, I think this is always a question, like how much does the court think about the political wins? I mean, and I think there are Supreme Court watchers, who are way deeper in this, but I think it's hard to look at the history of Supreme Court opinions and not see the political context of the time informing what they're doing. I mean, there are
No,
some cases like Brown versus Board that are like clearly going against maybe, popular opinion. And, in that case, the Chief Justice wanted to get a unanimous opinion. Um, and I guess, I mean, I don't know, maybe Dobbs was also like against public opinion and they just didn't care. I don't know, but I have to believe that, I mean, to answer your question, Ivan, my take is, and I'm interested in AG's take, if that case had come to them even a year earlier, I think it could have come out differently. It's, in other words, if it had come sooner after January 6th, if if the Department of Justice hadn't dragged its feet to actually begin that investigation, when like the memory was still fresh, when it was still unconscionable that that even happened, I think it would have been harder for them to rule that way. I think the fact that it was like 2024, at that point, what do they have to, and closer to the election? I don't know. What do you think?
Well, that's why they put it on the last possible day of oral arguments and released the opinion on the last possible day of opinions being released, was so that they could help him delay. But there were also multiple slow court issues that made it all the way up to the Supreme Court in the interim, in the January 6th investigation. For example, it took a year to litigate the executive privilege claims of about a dozen key witnesses, and they didn't, Jack Smith couldn't get the case, or Merrick Garland, the DOJ couldn't get the case without the testimony from those witnesses. Took another 4 months to litigate the stupid Twitter account subpoena for Trump's Twitter account information because Elon Musk wanted to tell Trump about it
Oh,
and
right.
block it from happening. We had another 4 month delay from the January 6th committee for some reason, and I still want an answer on this, refusing to hand over their work product.
That's right.
Um, and as we learned from Jack Smith's recent testimony behind closed doors, at least, they had to send somebody, I think JP Cooney, maybe last minute to like the day to be like, please go give me your stuff, hand it to me. And there, the reason that it was needed, a lot of people say that he needed it because he didn't want to do the work himself or whatever. But the reason that you need that testimony is because you have to compare it to the testimony that you have to make sure there aren't any inconsistencies so that your star witness might not be impeached on the stand. That's the reason that he needed all of that. So there's a lot of slow court process stuff that I know the Supreme Court had a hand in delaying. So I think the Supreme Court knew that if they had to make that kind of call closer to January 6th, that it would have been way more unpopular, and that's why they pushed it out. That, and I think to prevent
Well,
them
but it
from
even
being able,
started late, right? Like, I mean, Jack Smith didn't even start till what, November of 2022.
right, but
I'm saying if he had
Garland,
started in like February or I don't remember when Merrick Garland was appointed. Anyway,
Garland got there
I
in
still
March.
I'm one of these people who blames Merrick Garland for
I know.
dragging his feet.
I know. Garland, and I'm not going to take that away from anybody, but I'll tell you what happened. Garland got there in March. In June, well, in March or April, Lisa Monaco asked for a separate warrant for the Rudy stuff that she just confiscated in the Ukraine investigation. She asked for a separate warrant to be able to look at it for January 6th stuff, um, from Rudy Giuliani. Then in June, Merrick Garland was very frustrated with the slow pace of the investigation into Donald Trump, at least the top of the coup, or what he had been read in by JP Cooney, that he created something called the Investigations Unit. This didn't come out until the New York Times published it in 2024. But in June of 2021, just a couple months after he'd been there, he put together something called the Investigations Unit, which was like five close hold people, and they were tasked with investigating all the way up to Donald Trump, the coup. And they started with the Willard War Room, Roger Stone, Steve Bannon, the Oath Keepers. And that sort of was kind of going nowhere. But in the meantime, as Merrick Garland, this group that he put together was trying to subpoena, like get Scott Perry's phone and get John Eastman's phone and, do subpoenas and issue search warrants. The FBI, a guy named Dan Tuono, who Carol Leonnig writes extensively about in her book about the January 6th investigation, was blocking him. He said, the FBI guy was like, I'm not going to help you with these warrants. So Merrick Garland actually had to have the post office cops execute his search warrants because the FBI was not cooperating. Now, you could argue that he should have fired these people from the FBI, but it's pretty unusual. It's not the norm for the Department of Justice to come in and fire people at the FBI. They usually stay pretty separate. But that all finally went away with when they finally got rid of Dan Tuono because Merrick Garland opened an investigation into Dan Tuono himself. And then in January of 2022, he got rid of the deputy chief of staff to Chris Wray, who was blocking all of these search warrants and said that they aren't going to participate in this investigation. That's when finally the FBI said, we're fully investigating. And then it wasn't until 8 months later, when Donald Trump said he was running for president, that they put Jack Smith in there. Now, you and I were calling for a special counsel the minute the attorney general got there. But he, I guess, wanted to do this himself. But that 1 year litigation with the executive privilege thing started under Merrick Garland in mid 2021 and lasted into 2022 and
Yeah.
really, really put kind of a huge delay on being able to gather evidence. But regardless, the Supreme Court knew they pushed back the date. They did the last possible argument. They did the last possible thing because it was going to have to come back to them anyway after Judge Chutkan decided what were official acts and what were not. After the immunity brief that Jack Smith filed, 165-page immunity brief, the Supreme Court knew it would have to come back all the way up to the Supreme Court, and that wasn't going to happen until probably another year after the election. So I don't. You could have had Sally Yates in there. You could have had Dog the Bounty Hunter as Attorney General. The Supreme Court was going to stop those trials regardless. That's what I'm convinced of. But yes, there was a lot of slow problems to start with in the investigation.
So I know you have to go soon. What are you feeling hopeful about? Because this is what we normally talk about in our happy hours is, well, we don't normally talk about that. We try to end on that.
The tariff thing,
The
as I
tariff
said,
thing.
let
Trump
me
is mad.
pull,
Okay.
let me pull up my news from uh, Friday really quick because Friday was a really great news day and it gave me a lot of hope. And I'll just share a couple of quick headlines with you about that day because this is the kind of stuff that I love. First of all, New Mexico Attorney General reopened a criminal probe into Zorro Ranch for Epstein. Then Prince Andrew was arrested. Great
Oh
photo.
yeah, that was a good one.
Yeah, now I know he was arrested for trade secrets and not actual sex trafficking, but I mean, I'll take it.
And can we just highlight here that actual royalty doesn't have immunity? And
Yeah,
this is also happening during the week where the former president of South Korea got sentenced to life.
that was the other one.
Anyway,
Former,
yeah, okay,
I,
go ahead.
I had Supreme Court envy of South Korea.
I know.
Their constitutional court upheld all that. A federal judge threw out Trump's mass detention policy. That people can't get bond hearings or whatever,
Right.
which is why they want to set up these mass concentration camp warehouses to make a crap load of money by detaining people without giving them bond hearings. And the Secretary of the VA, Doug Collins, walked back his stupid rule that stripped veterans of their disability benefits. If medicine cures you, then you don't have a disability, and we aren't going to pay for your medicine or your disability. He got so much backlash on that that he immediately, well, about a day later, walked it back. The kind of thing that and the federal grand juries and petit juries refusing to indict or return true bill on a lot of these just ridiculous cases, whether it's against ICE or CBP officers or James Comey or Letitia James or Sandwich Guy or whatever, this failure of the retribution tour that he's been promising, that abject failure also brings me a lot of joy. But it's the people power. It's the federal grand juries. It's the petit juries. It's we the people pushing back on Doug Collins, we the people pushing back on the Epstein files. I think we have a lot more power than they want us to think we have. That's why they spend billions of dollars to try to convince us that our vote doesn't matter. And I think he's terrified. James Tallarico said that's why they're censoring this interview with Colbert is because they're terrified that they could flip Texas blue. That's how bad
Yeah.
it is for them right now. And I just want to keep kicking them while they're down. Um, Figuratively speaking, if the CIA is
Yep.
listening.
No, we're not advocating violence.
Nope. Um, Although I did like that kid who punched that one guy, okay, I thought that was pretty great. But still, those kinds of things, the people power, the elections that we've had so far, we've trounced them in these elections. That kind of stuff. But I trust elections more than polls, and that's the sort of stuff that brings me hope.
Yay.
Yay.
Um, well, anything else that we should talk about? Anyone else have any questions?
I filed another FOIA request for the for the apparently I like a bunch of children had written letters from the Dilley concentration camp and they had
Oh, right.
read on the floor of Congress during the Todd Lyons hearing. He's the chief of
And now
ICE.
they're taking them away from they're trying to stop the kids from writing letters.
Yeah,
It's
after
like they're
ProPublica
just
put the piece out and shared the letters, apparently ICE officers raided the dormitories and confiscated and destroyed some of these children's letters. So I filed a FOIA request for the confiscated letters to see what the government has to say about it. That's my latest.
Well, we will look forward to seeing your amazing reporting. Do you want to tell everybody where they can find you?
Oh, just Google Mueller, she wrote. I'm everywhere, but
I'm sure you all know AG. But
everything's free. Daily Beans is free. It's a free podcast. This my Substack, The Breakdown is free. You can support me by listening to that podcast or reading my Substack, subscribing to my Substack for free. I'd love to see you there. It's MuellerSheWrote.com.
awesome. You can stay on. I'm just going to stop recording and you let's wait, stop recording. There we go.